Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and I am very excited. I have a guest that I have been wanting to have on the podcast for quite a while, to be honest. She is a writer, an artist, and an editor who has worked for Marvel, Valiant, IDW, a ton of titles that it's a fairly exhaustive list of wonderful comics like Bitterroot, Redlands, I think the recent Bug Wars, and a whole slew of others. And we're going to talk about all kinds of comics today. I am so excited. Please welcome to the podcast to Heather Antos. Heather, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing super well. Thanks for having me.
Now, I've been wanting to have you on the podcast to talk to you for a while. Because your name is one of all the stuff that you've done, but two, your name has come up like quite a bit. I think we have done over
Oh no.
400. No, good though. We've done 400 episodes. I've done over 200, and a number of times that your name has come up, either just from just someone in the industry or worked on a lot of the comics that, I have talked to the creators who have just had wonderful things to say about your work on the comics. So I'm like, man, I think I should have this Heather on because your name has come up quite a bit. So yeah, I'm really excited to have you on here to talk about all the things that you've done in comics.
Yeah, anything that anyone has ever said, it's all lies. Don't believe a word of it. No, that's very, very kind. And thank you to all the lovely people who have dared utter my name.
So I guess I wanted to start a little bit, at the beginning in terms of your relationship with comics that made you eventually want to work in them.
Yeah, I didn't grow up like with a local comic book shop or anything like that. My mom would actually say I drew comics before I knew what comics were. I've always been an avid um artist, writer, reader. I won a lot of reading competitions as a kid. Um I think my path was set pretty early on. But one of my earliest memories of comics actually is fighting with my siblings over the comic section of the Sunday newspaper. Like that was always something we always did, to read, whether it was Peanuts or Kathy or, any of those strips back in the day. And I grew up watching the Adam West Batman show and, the Tim Burton Batman movies. And, as when I was in high school, we got like the Dark Knight and like all of that sort of stuff, right? And the Marvel stuff. It was a natural, it was a pop culture phenomenon. And it was always like tangential and I was always interested in it. But it just like, the newsstands weren't a thing anymore, right? Comics just themselves weren't really in my natural purview. But it wasn't until when I was in college, I took an American literature course where we read a lot of the Vertigo classic books. We read Constantine or Hellblazer. We read Sandman, Why the Last Man. And it was around that time, coincidentally, that the Marvel Now movement was happening, right? The reboot of the Marvel universe, as well as the New 52, like that, those were happening around the same time. So it was a kind of a good time. Also being in college, being in a bigger city, where there was a comic shop, like it was a good time for me to jump on, to try stuff out for the first time. And, but honestly, I will say like, Sandman, I know it's cliche and everyone says this, but like Sandman is the comic series that really made me interested in comics as a storytelling form, as the medium, particularly the 24-hour diner issue in volume 2, I think it's volume 2, issue 6, where you see all these different character threads kind of come together in, like, the most fucked up way.
Yeah.
And it's true, but it's truly a, like, those characters in the 24-hour diner don't know how they're related, but you as the reader know because you've read everything else leading up to that moment, and it makes it,
Right.
as an issue by itself, it's brilliant, but, like, the payoff of having, been along for the ride is truly excellent. And all the little literary allegories throughout, and just, it's that really kind of challenges me as an editor and a creator to push comics, beyond what we're used to. And I think that's something that you see a lot in the work that I do, be it, the You Are Deadpool book where you literally have to make a die out of the recap page to roll the die to play the comic, Gwenpool, where
Mhm.
her powers were breaking comic books as a form. And, even the most recent Warp Your Own Way, the Choose Your Own Adventure graphic novel that just won the Hugo Award for us at IDW. Like, I love to challenge creators in the medium to just do things that I've never seen before.
I mean, yeah, that's the really exciting part of comics, to
Yeah.
see something that you know, haven't seen before, and to be a part of that.
Yeah.
But how does that love of storytelling, the love of what you see in Sandman, take you to an editor at Marvel?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so, like I said, it was around college in that time, and in that kind of pop culture geek resurgence, in media, I started doing, what a lot of us do, right? I did, like, reviews online and, like, criticism and, kind of the press angle. And I was, near the end of college, and I was trying to figure out, "Oh god, what am I gonna do with my life? This theater degree is useless." Um,
Is that
and
what your degree is in? Theater? Is that
I
what
was
you
a
have, a theater degree?
theater and film double major with a French minor. Um, all useless.
Okay.
That's not true. They're very useful in what I do. They're very, very useful. But,
Yeah, I would think the theater one would be useful.
it's honestly a lot of people in comics editorial come from theater backgrounds, I've discovered, like, a lot of us do. Um,
Oh, cool.
yeah. I mean, our job is to wrangle creatives on a limited budget by a deadline. Their show must go on no
Yeah,
matter what.
yeah,
There's a lot of crossover there. Um,
yeah.
but a good friend of mine at the time, said, "Well, you like comics, why don't you just do that?" You know? And I had never up until that moment, like, really considered, "Oh, yeah, people get paid to make these. This is this is a job for people."
Right.
Um, and so I really just started to explore what opportunities in the industry there were. Obviously, I knew of, being a writer, being an artist, being a colorist, top of the line, creator front, creator facing roles. But one of the things I noticed is a lot of the books that I read tended to all have the same editor behind them, whether it was at the time, like Mike Martz's work on the Bat Office at DC, or, I read a lot of Will Moss books when he was at DC, and then a lot of Will Moss books when he was at Marvel, or, I read all of
Right.
Jordan White's books at Marvel. And I thought that was really interesting to me, because clearly there was something that these people who were shepherding these titles that they were doing that I was resonating with. And I didn't really know what it was a comic book editor did at the time, because, who possibly knows what a comic book editor does? It's kind of this, like, amorphous, weird, role.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I did what any good millennial does at the time. And I just found editors on Twitter, and I tweeted them, and I was just like, "Hey, will you talk with me? I wanna, learn more about what it is that you do." And it just so happens that I was gonna be at C2E2. This was 2014. I was gonna be at C2E2, in, like, a month or so. Jordan White, who's at Marvel, was also going to be at C2E2, and he agreed to sit down with me. And I left that convention, being like, this is it. I want to be a comic book editor. Um, and honestly, I just like, if anyone has ever met me, I'm probably the most like determined, stubborn person that they've met. I really set my sights on something, and I do it.
Yeah.
And I just started self-publishing. I knew that all writers want to do is write. They don't want to have to like make a book. They don't want to have to find an artist. Our artists want to do is draw. They don't want to have to worry about a schedule or worry about a printer or worry about finding a color, like all that stuff. So I started doing that, and put together a huge anthology at the time. And this was in the early days of anthologies when they weren't like as popular, as they are
Yeah.
now. And I put a call out thinking I'd get like maybe 4 people interested, and I ended up getting over 100 submissions that I had to whittle down. And in between C2E2, which was in March of 2014, and October, New York Comic Con, I put together an anthology with over 50 creators, funded it, got it produced on Kickstarter, raised like $15,000. Um, and by the time I ran into Jordan White again at New York Comic Con, 6 months later, I was able to say, look what I've done, since our first conversation. Little did I know he had just gotten promoted and was going to be looking to hire his own assistant at the time. So he asked me, would you ever be willing to move to New York? I said yes. 1 month later, I was interviewing for Marvel. 2 months later, I moved from Michigan to New York City to be an assistant editor at Marvel, and the rest is history.
Wow. Well, just to speak a little bit on that history, I'm curious because I am, I'm somebody that always, I can't help it. I'm a lawyer, so I always think of like what's like the worst case scenario and try to
Yeah.
plan for that. What's the worst that could happen? Let's like have a plan for it. But I often don't let myself think about like what is the best.
Mhm.
So I don't know like what type of person you are like when you start working at Marvel and when like looking back now and thinking of the work you did with Star Wars
Yeah.
and like Gwenpool, like could like even in your like wildest imagination, were you prepared for like what what those comics would like do and go on to
No.
do?
No, it is surreal, right? Like looking back and thinking of it, and every day, like I still have moments, right? I've been working professionally as an editor for 10 years now, and I still have moments where it's just like, holy shit, I can't believe I do this. Like this is wild. Which is great to still be able to have that feeling, right? This long in
Yeah.
your career. But honestly, at the time I was interviewing with Marvel, I was also fortunate enough to be interviewing with Dark Horse. And, you know, I knew, when you're interviewing and you get the vibe, like you're going to get an offer, like you kind of know. And like, I knew I was going to get an offer from both companies. And it really just was going to come down to what path I wanted to take. And, heart of my hearts, the indie stuff, the horror stuff, like that's where my heart lies. I do, as you said, Redlands, Bug Wars, Bloodstained Teeth, like that sort of stuff. I
Yeah.
love those projects. Exorcism at 1600 Pen, you know, I love those types of books. And now the Dark Line, I get to do it at IDW. But um and I knew that like my passions would probably be more in line with what Dark Horse did. Um but if I started at Dark Horse, I didn't know if I would ever go to Marvel, ever have the opportunity to go to a Marvel. But I knew if I started at
Yeah.
a Marvel, I would have the opportunity to go to a Dark Horse. And so I wanted to like really be strategic with my career. I didn't know I was interviewing for Star Wars. I had no idea. They knew. They talked to me specifically because they knew I'm a huge Star Wars junkie. I wish I had known that. I would have felt better in the interview. But, um, did I cry after my interview with Marvel? I did. I was so nervous. I was so nervous. But, like, you know, it is wild. It is truly, like, I say it all the time, the success we had with Gwenpool is a fluke. The success we had with Dr. Aphra is just, like, the perfect scenario of right character, right concept, right time, the stars kind of aligning with that sort of stuff. But I think it also comes too with, like, trusting your gut instinct and, like, persevering.
Yeah.
Because like, as much as we like to think, "Oh, it's just a bunch of people playing with Spider-Man action figures and coming up with wild ideas," like, there's still a lot of hoops you have to go through to get those ideas approved and out the door, and a lot of no's happen, even when you're the one in charge of all the toys. You still get a lot of no's, and so,
Yeah.
learning how to navigate those hoops, w was a skill set that I had to develop super early on, that, it really just comes down to, like, trusting your gut instinct, um, on a lot of that.
And so now to turn like more to the present, what you've been doing at IDW with Star Trek,
Mhm,
to go from Star Wars to Star Trek and the things that you're, I think the group editor of that, right?
mhm,
And s I mean, I've recently read Red Shirts. I had Christopher
yeah,
Cantwell on the podcast. We talked a little bit about that. I read the first issue of The Last Starship, and I mean, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, but Star Trek comics, I just isn't something that I've gotten like
mhm.
into. But man, I feel like I'm missing out because Red Shirts has been phenomenal. What is
Thanks.
kind of that experience been like working on those comics? And what is your role in terms of kind of like getting the right writers and artists in on
Yeah,
those projects? Like, what is that like? Because there's so many. There's been,
yeah,
not just Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly and the wonderful artists, but you have, so many different Star Trek series, and they've all
yeah.
everyone I've taken a look at has been, wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you know, wh I when I got the role of editor on the Star Trek line, like, that was actually something I chose. There was a bunch of editorial shifts that were happening at IDW. This was, like, around 2021. And Bobby Curnow, who was a longtime editor on TMNT, was, taking a leave from the company, and John Barber, who was the EIC at the time, really wanted me to take on Turtles. There was a lot of push, like, take over Turtles because it was, the big superhero line, of the company and all of these things. And with my Marvel
Sure.
background, like, it was just like a natural
Right. It
progression.
made sense.
It made a lot of sense, and I totally understand
Yeah.
it, but, like, for me, it's like I've done the superhero thing. There's not a lot for me to do with Turtles. Like, Turtles already has its audience. It has, like, it's not one of those lines you go in and shake up because it's very stable and it has its core. But Star Trek, there was a lot of opportunity to do something, a lot of opportunity to sculpt something and build something with. Kind of like he said, like, not a lot of people paid attention to Star Trek comics. They were for Star Trek fans only at the time and for the hardcore Star Trek fans. And nothing against those books or the creators or anything like that, but I that always felt weird to me, this kind of attitude that the nerd and comics industry has towards Star Trek. Like, even within our niche comics nerddom, Star Trek is still too niche and nerdy for us, right? Which is so wild to me. But it's true. You laugh because it's
That's
true.
funny. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, even amongst the nerdiest of nerds, we're still like, "Ew, Star Trek." Like, that's, like,
Yeah.
kind of the attitude. And, like, I find that so disrespectful because the pop culture industry as we know it would not exist without Star Trek. Star Trek
Yeah.
was the first fandom that put on fan conventions. It was the first, that we had the first sci-fi conventions. We had the first, all of that stuff was put on because of Star Trek fans.
Right.
Star Trek was the first, like, cinematic universe. It was the first, like, in the MCU would not exist as we know it today without Star Trek. We wouldn't have San Diego Comic-Con as we know it today without Star Trek, and it really has shaped and informed so much of our sci-fi pop culture that I kind of wanted to build a line to remind people or to engage people that, like, no, like, Star Trek is cool actually, if you just give it a chance. And in order to do that, I really wanted to build a line and work with creators and characters and concepts that spoke to comics fans first, not just Star Trek fans. And that meant building a line of books and stories that could only exist in the comics. We're not just doing here's a lost episode from a TV show, like we did with the flagship series, right? That just concluded this past year. We built what I call our Avengers of Star Trek. You have Benjamin Sisko, Beverly Crusher, Scotty, all of these characters coming together in a book that never could appear on TV because they're just not around to do so anymore.
Yeah.
And with a budget to do things that they could never do on the TV shows and these this epic 3-year long saga and like what we're doing with Red Shirts. Like Red Shirts was actually the first idea I had for a Star Trek comic, but I knew when I took over the line that Paramount wasn't going to be quite ready for what that this book is. If you read the most recent issue that just came out, we had a transporter accident, a big body horror accident where, you know, a Romulan and a red shirt combine.
Yes. Yeah, that's issue 3, right?
That's
I
issue
think.
3. Yep.
Yeah, I'm all caught up on red shirts. But yeah,
Yeah.
my plug for red shirts, I was so excited. The covers are fantastic. Like
Thank you.
I'm not like a collector. Like I don't buy a ton of like variant covers. I mean, I have more comic books than my wife would like me to have, but I love the covers. I think Chris Sheehan had done
Yeah.
some.
Yeah.
But I was very excited for that idea because it's kind of not. It is the one thing that has really broken out beyond Star Trek and has really influenced pop culture in
It
terms of the
is.
idea of like a red shirt.
Yep.
And the series is so well done. I'm a
Thank
huge
you.
fan of Christopher Cantwell. Love
Yeah.
his series, The Blue Flame, that he did. And yeah, I just the
Yeah.
3 issues I've read so far have been phenomenal. So there's
Thank
my
you.
little red shirts commercial for any listeners who haven't checked it out yet. Even if you're
Yeah.
not a Star Trek fan, it's
It's
very
just an
good.
action. It's just a sci-fi action book. That's all it is. And like
Right.
the my whole idea with it is, the idea of a red shirt, like what a red shirt is, like has breached beyond Star Trek fandom, right? It's become a meme in and of itself. And
Sure.
everyone, you don't have to know who Kirk or Spock is, but people know what a red shirt is. And um, you know, it's become that meme, that joke. And so I wanted to like know like this is actually like pretty fucked up that if you're a security officer, you're probably gonna die. And we see them just get written off all the time. And so I Chris and I, we really wanted to come up with a cast of characters that like you fell in love with and you had a favorite character and you're rooting for this character. And then wow, that character died in the most gruesome way you didn't know was possible in a Star Trek comic.
Yeah.
Um, and
It's remarkable in terms of like how quickly the writing and the art endears the characters to you. Because I mean, it is like Star Trek: The Dirty Dozen,
yeah,
or where you just have a sense that, all right, they're red shirts. I know something bad's going to happen, but you really, in very few panels, give a quick enough of a snapshot of like their personality and like their interactions, and it really is so well done for the payoff of the premise, in the 3 issues I've read so far. And
yeah,
there's also like an overarching story woven in there as well. It's
yeah,
not just these guys are cannon fodder.
yeah. No,
It's
it's true.
great.
It is a true like you truly don't know who's going to make it out, if anyone's going to make it out. And
Yeah.
we hope to break your heart a million times reading that book. I think my favorite thing was Um, I think it was a review of issue 2, and someone was like, "So and so is my new favorite character," and my assistant and I were reading it, and she was like, "Oh, they die in issue 3." Like, oh, well. But that's the goal, right? Is to have you have a
Yeah.
favorite character, then we kill them off.
Yeah. In terrible, terrible fashion.
Terrible ways.
Right. Yeah, there also, has to be the fun of something like The Last Starship, where it
Mm.
just seems like I've read the first issue. The premise kind of seems like a fever dream of everything I like about, Star Trek, like
Yeah.
desperate circumstances, like everybody's hopeless, like
Yeah.
trying to find the hope in a terrible situation. The Borg show up and someone
And
from the
Kirk.
past. And it's
Yeah,
like,
and
yeah,
suddenly
and
Kirk
Kirk.
is there. How is Kirk there?
And it's just, oh yeah, this is wild that like somebody's getting, to do this.
Yeah,
First issue is fantastic, and I'm not
thank
familiar with
you.
the artist. I just thought the
Yeah,
artwork was like wonderful. Not anything I expected for like what I would envision of a Star Trek comic,
yeah.
but just works so well. It's just so awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of this, like, retro futuristic noir. Adrian Bonilla, the artist. This is actually his first time doing
Yes.
a American comic book. He's this wonderful Spanish artist, that I've developed a relationship with over the last couple of years, and, as an editor, I'm always, like, looking out for, the next great artist and, like, what's the right project, right? Because if something's gonna be someone's breakout comic, I wanna not only set the comic up for success, but also set the artist up for success, right? And especially with a licensor, and with that fan base and everything like that. And Adrian's work is just like constantly blowing us all away on the book, aligned with Heather Moore colors, just absolutely stunning. And I mean, this book is truly like such a passion project for everyone involved. It first came about the idea for it first came about, I think, like a year and a half, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I think it was New York Comic Con. 2 years ago is when we first started conversations of it, and we really got into the meat of it, San Diego Comic Con last year with Jackson, Colin, and I remember, our lunch where we sat down and we really broke out, like, what this was gonna be. And, originally it wasn't Kirk. Originally, it wasn't, the Enterprise. Originally, it wasn't the Borg. It was all of these things. And this book was a big swing. I mean, getting Paramount to approve Agnes, getting Paramount to approve Kirk, getting Paramount to approve how we're using Kirk and the things that are gonna happen with Kirk and the issues to come, as well as the things that are gonna happen in the Federation for the issues to come. Like, we're taking every big swing that you can possibly take with this book. And I think, that it really comes down to the trust that myself, Jackson, and Colin have built with Paramount over the last, several years doing the flagship and, you know, showing them that, like, no, 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 we can treat your world with care. We've got it. Um, that they're allowing us to take these swings because it was witchy there. Like, there were some times where, like, truly, I didn't know if this book was gonna happen. So I say it all the time, like, every comic is a little miracle in your hands, and, like, The Last Starship, like, truly is a miracle, and, like, I'm just so blown away at the reception. Like, people are really enjoying it, and, we tried to make it as entry level friendly as possible. If you've never seen a Star Trek show, you can just pick this up and we give you all the information you need to know, like right from page one, because this is a period that has never been explored in TV. These are characters that, aside from, Agnes and Kirk, like, have never been explored in TV. But even our Kirk is a new
Yeah.
Kirk. Like, he's not, you know, he's the reincarnation, right? And so, like, a big part of the story, it'll be out by the time this episode airs, issue 2, we get into it. A big part of our Kirk's story is him, like, coming to like trying to like, am I Kirk? Can I live up to this legend?
Right.
Am I a fraud? I don't know. Which is like that's a lot of weight to carry on one's shoulders, the legend of like the
Yeah.
captain of
Right.
Starfleet.
Yeah. I mean, especially I think isn't there I think one of the panels in the comic is showing is it San Francisco and there's a
Yeah,
statue of
yeah. Of
Kirk.
Kirk,
I mean, that's
it's like Kirk,
yeah.
Janeway, and who else isn't Picard? I think. Yeah,
Is it Picard? Yeah.
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 Uh,
That's a
it's
lot of
like
weight.
that's a lot of weight to carry, man.
Um so I also wanted to talk about some of the other stuff at IDW in terms of the new
Yeah,
is it like considered the dark line or
yeah, yeah. The
because I
Dark Line.
know um well recently wasn't Event Horizon IDW,
Yeah,
right?
Event Horizon's
Uh
us. Yep, Event Horizon,
with
Sleepy Hollow, Twilight Zone. Yeah,
yeah, and now Smile, A Quiet Place, Exorcism at Buckingham Palace
yep,
are all part of it, right?
yep.
So when things like that, when opportunities, I guess, come up where IDW has, purchased a license or gone out and gotten it, and then is it like your job as the editor or one of the editors on those types of lines to then go and find the person who would be the right fit? And how do you go about kind of matching up? Oh, here's this artist, I've been paying attention to, or
Yeah.
here's this writer that I've worked with before. Like, what is, I guess, kind of the calculations for that for you to figure out who might, be a good fit, or who do you want to introduce to
Yeah.
the editor in chief to like make those matchups?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it comes down to just like, knowing the creators I work with and like knowing the stuff that they're into, right? Like I didn't know Christian Ward was an Event Horizon fan, but like his art is very cosmic horror kind of leaning. And so
Sure.
it was when we had the license and we needed a writer. It was just kind of a thing. I float like, do you like Event Horizon? Or, or I'll occasionally float with trusted creators, you know, um, is we have these licenses. Is this something you'd be interested in? Like not with the Dark Line, but also another book that I oversee the editor who edits it, like Street Sharks, right? We have Street Sharks and like this was
Oh,
pure
yeah.
you know, this was pure coincidence, but we had Street Sharks and we were trying to like, find the creative team for it. And the art side was a little bit easier because it's a cartoon model, right? You just need someone who can, luckily having done My Little Pony, Sonic, Lower Decks, we have a great stable of artists who are great at, drawing on models. So the art side of that was a little bit easier to cast, but with writers like Street Sharks is kind of like it was a blip in time, right? It was such a like moment and then everyone forgot it ever existed as a cartoon. And I just like I put out to Nick Nino who's the editor on it. I was just like, I don't know why, but I feel like Stephanie Williams is a Street Sharks. Like I just ask her. Like I have like and mind you, I had never heard of Street Sharks before we got the license. So this isn't like something I had talked about with anyone ever. I just like Stephanie Williams just puts off Street Sharks vibes to me. I don't know why. Couldn't tell you. And like he sends the email and she literally responds back, all capital letters. I love Street Sharks, like freaking out. So like sometimes it is just vibes. I don't know. Like I truly don't know. So, sometimes it is just you'll put off the vibes, right? But a lot of times it is, I read a lot for my job. My job is to read a lot of comics, to know who's
Right.
upcoming, to know who's doing what concepts are working well, also to know, is this a difficult license? Is the licensor difficult in this? Are there certain things, notes that we need to hit or certain things that are going to be off limits and knowing what writers are best suited and best equipped to be in that circumstance. Not every writer, you know, um is best suited for every single license just because of the different hurdles that, an individual license can present. Some licenses are easier
Yeah.
than others, and a lot of that depends on the alchemy, right, of all the people involved. And um but a lot of it just truly, when it comes to, usually it's familiarity and just being a fan, like, comes first. And so that's why I always tell, creators, if you're a fan of something, let editors know. like that makes our jobs easier if you're already a fan of the thing that you're working on, right? If I know, like, oh, you already know the lore of Smile, I don't have to, like, teach you and hold your hand through, how the entity works, how the entity passes on from people to people, right? The rules of the world. That's always super, super helpful. And then just, like, also knowing that the people that you work with are going to treat, these toys with care, because that's really all it is at the end of the day, right? We are shepherds for these brands and these franchises, and the licensors need to trust that whoever we hand those keys to are going to, treat their babies with care. And I always like to, like, in my job, because if you look at Star Trek, where it started before I took the books on, and the type of books we're doing now, like, the art is drastically different, right? The creative, the arcs, the stories and stuff that we're doing is very different. And that was very intentional through, like, pushes, right? Pushing the licensor to expand their comfort levels, and see that, like, no, we can push the limits of what you've done before, but we're not going to break anything. And that comes from, like, a lot of listening to a licensor and understanding what their biggest fears are, what their biggest sticking points are, what their biggest concerns are, and making sure that anything that you're presenting to them that make them might get their hackles raised, right? That you're making sure that you're presenting it in a way that you're, still assuaging those concerns, if that makes sense, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Um, uh, so it's a lot of, I call it chess, like, it's chess, not checkers, a lot of times. It's being intentional and being smart. If I'm gonna, like, bring on an artist like Adrian Bonilla, right? If I'm gonna do an artist like Adrian Bonilla, who, Star Trek has never had someone, like, quite this stylized before, I'm making sure it's paired with writers that they trust and know are, have everything. So they still have their comfort blanket, their safety blanket, to make sure that everything's gonna be fine. And it's the same thing with the horror stuff too. It's the same thing, what we're doing with Smile. Hannah Rose May, I knew, going when I got the license, like, she's a huge fan of that franchise. When Smile 2 came out, she would not stop talking to me about it. Like, and so when the opportunity to pitch it came on, like, she was one of the first people, we spoke to. And her pitch is just killer. It's so good. A bunch of models going around Fashion Week with the entity possessing them, like, Smile models. Are you kidding me? Like, it's great. So, it's a lot of listening, it's a lot of listening, a lot of paying attention, and yeah, being intentional.
Just to get back to Street Sharks for a second, even if
Yeah, of
you weren't
course. Yeah.
familiar with it, you at least by now seen the Vin Diesel at the toy fair with Street Sharks?
I have. No, that was one of the first things that was shown to me. One of my very, very good friends, runs a toy podcast, actually, Adventures in Collecting. And as soon as he heard, he, like, sent that to me. Like, he was the
Oh,
first.
yeah. It's
Yeah, I can't, between my time at Bloodshot at Valiant, and now Street Sharks, I can't hide from Vin Diesel. He follows me
no,
everywhere. Yeah.
no. It's a very important part of internet lore
Of his
is,
lore,
the Vi
yeah.
yeah, the Vin Diesel at a 1995, I think, toy fair.
Hey, we all
Um,
started somewhere.
yeah, absolutely. Uh, so, what do you what do you think is the most important factor? Like once you find the right fit, when you're either the group editor or even so a lot of the creator owned stuff that you've done and you're editor on, like once you have the team together, what do you think is the most important thing for you to do to set the team up or to set the book up for a success?
Yeah, I think it's just, making sure all of the goals are aligned of everyone. I often equate my job to being like the Google Maps algorithm. Like, let's all make sure the destination, we're on the same page of what the destination is, right? And, I can help us find the most efficient path. I can help us find the scenic route. Along the way, we might run into some detours or delays or take a wrong turn, and that's fine. We're all here to get back on the path together. And it's really just creating, that space where we all feel free to do our best work. My job is to create a situation, an environment where all a writer has to worry about is writing, all an artist has to worry about is drawing, all a colorist has to worry about is coloring, and hopefully I've taken care of as much of the other bullshit on the side so that they don't have to worry about that. Of course, I can't do time management for individuals,
Yeah.
but, like, I go to Christian, Christian and I are working on some stuff right now, and it's just how much time do you need? You need this much time, okay, this is what a schedule looks like with this much time per issue. Does that work for you? Great. Okay, this is, and then I check in with every single project I do, every single creator I work with once a week. Just to make sure, like, hey, has life happened? Life happens sometimes. Let's figure it out. Let's, here are our options. It's editors, even in work for hire environments, like people view them as like the boss, but I'm not the boss. I'm just like the I don't know, I'm just there to oversee everything and make sure it's all going according to plan as best as possible. And what that might mean for an individual project or individual creator is very, very different. There are some creators that will wanna text me daily to talk creative stuff and, show me work in progress or whatever. There are other creators that don't wanna talk to me at all until the stuff is turned in and done, like, there's
Mhm.
just different levels, and it's just making sure I am being the editor to those creators that they need to do their best work. When I was working with the late and great Justin Ponzer, he was someone who, like, he worked best during a chit chat. And so if that meant I'm calling him every day and talking with him on an hour on the phone about, what we're watching on TV until he turns in his pages, great. That's how he does his best work. I have another creator who's terrified of their email inbox. That's great. Instagram DM is how you prefer to communicate. We can do that. There's a lot of editors out there that try and force creators to work the way they want to work, and I
Mhm.
think that's just not setting up your team for success. It's best to figure out how your team does their best work and do whatever you can to provide that environment for them.
Okay. Wow. That's yeah, I it's you wonder like about some of the process of like the editing for, when you're not doing like your own thing, like when you're hearing how it all goes with a publisher. But I mean, it makes a lot of sense in terms of how you see your role and why you have been, so successful, I'd say in the industry in terms of the books that you've shepherded. All the things that you've said in terms of how you work with creators, listening in terms of licensors, it's just remarkable. And how about with your own art and
Yeah.
illustrations and writing? Did I see that you have something in new Lifeline switching season
I
anthology?
do. Yeah, I wrote a 8-page story with Morgan Beam, near and dear artist. We worked together on an IDW original book called Crashing, written by Matthew Klein. And she most recently drew Twilight Zone #1 that was written by Dan Waters. That's really great. Definitely check that out. But I adore her. And Michelle Abinader, who is the curator and editor of that anthology alongside Phil Falco and Kat Kalamia,
Yeah.
she's a near and dear friend of mine, and she asked if I would write in it. And I said, well, only if Morgan Beam will draw it. And then Morgan said yes. And I was like, well, I guess I'm writing this. Um, and yeah, I like writing a lot. I like drawing a lot, but it's for me, it's like a creative outlet. It's not like a passion. Like I'm not there's a lot of comics creators I run into when I table at shows who are like, "Oh no, you're coming for our jobs." And I will say it here, I say it all the time, I'm not coming for your jobs. I do not like people who want to write and draw comics full time are crazy and insane human beings. I have the utmost respect for you. I could not do that life. I do not want that life. But it's a fun exercise for me. Like I do like writing, I do like drawing, and I think it's also important to like, if my job is going to be giving notes on art, giving notes on scripts, giving notes on like, it's important to at least have a basic understanding of how that job is done. And you can articulate and speak the language better in communication. But I also think too, it adds another level of respect of creators to be like, oh yeah, no, she knows what she's talking about. Like she does it, you know. I've drawn interior pages, I've colored my own comic, I've done covers, like I've done it, you know. And I think it's just important, even if you're not, like, gonna be the next Alex Ross, but I think it's very important for any editor to have a basic understanding of color theory, to have a basic understanding of how Photoshop works and, you know, but it is fun to I've had a lot of opportunities the last couple of years. I wrote this story for Morgan Beam, and I wrote a story that Adrian Bonilla from Last Starship drew in an anthology called Let Her Be Evil a couple years ago. And then I drew a story for the When I Was Young anthology that Sam Maggs wrote last year. So it's a fun little exercise to break up to work on the other side of the brain rather than just like the critical thinking note stuff. It's a
Mhm.
fun, it's nice to shake it up, but and it keeps it still fun. I think that's the important thing with my art. I never want it to become work. And I like that balance of what I have now because I get to just draw whatever I want, you know.
Yeah.
It's not work. And if I don't want to do something, I don't have to do it. And it's really nice. It's really nice that way.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Um, well, Heather, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and I feel like and chatting with me about your journey in comics, about editing, about the stuff that IDW, has coming out. I will just say, listeners, when this podcast, if you're listening to it when it comes out in November, you're still going to have plenty of time to catch up on Red Shirts. Please check out The Last Starship. I thought uh, it was the art in particular was not anything I expected in a Star Trek comic, like what I had as somebody who's seen every episode of like The Next Generation. Um, I just loved it. I thought it was phenomenal.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, we're all going to be on the lookout for the rest of the IDW Dark line in terms of Smile and A Quiet Place. I just really love a lot of that stuff. And if you're not reading, I mean, I had Christian on the podcast. If you're not reading Event Horizon, go do that. And I had mentioned I think Bug Wars earlier. I think
Yeah.
you're editing Bug
Yep.
Wars. Jason Aaron and Mahmoud Asrar. Bug Wars is phenomenal. Like
Thank
talk about a
you.
comic. Talk about a comic has a very simple, like
The premise is so
this.
simple. Yeah.
Yeah, this meets that. Like I I read somewhere, I don't know if it was Jason, described it as Honey, I Shrunk the Kids meets Conan the
Yep.
Barbarian.
Yep. That's what we call
Talk
it.
about a comic that delivers on that
Yep.
promise and then some.
Yep.
It is unreal. It is absolutely gorgeous and terrible in terms of, I hate bugs, and
Yeah.
it's so good. I want everyone to read it. It's
Well,
so good.
we've got plenty more plans for Bug Wars. We've got a lot more on the way for that one. So it's super exciting. So thank you so much for having me on. This was super great.
Yeah, no, absolutely my pleasure. So listeners, thank you so much for listening. Shout out to my brother Bobby, the Cryptid Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated fan. Bobby listens to all my episodes, and as we're recording this, Bobby and I will be spending the weekend at Baltimore Comic-Con. So
Very fun.
we'll have an episode about everybody we got to meet and chat with at Baltimore Comic-Con. We've been going for a number of years, and it's a really fun show. And yeah, Heather, thank you so much. Listeners, find me on Blue Sky or wherever I am on the internet. Tell me what you've been reading, especially if you've been reading anything that Heather's worked on or that Heather edited. Love to talk about Star Trek comics now. I'm going to take a deep dive and as I was going through some things, I haven't read all of Lore War, but I think I need to get into that next. So, all right. So thank you for listening.
Yeah.
I'll see you next time, and thank you so much to my guest Heather Antos.